Hey everybody, so this video is going to be a bit long, but why it's long is I'm giving you kind of my whole process for how I approach documentaries, how I take all the footage that I just shot and how I actually get it into a rough cut. So I'm going to be showing you a film that I've been working on the past little while that we're in the midst of. I got to work with an incredible new director named Kwesi. This is his first documentary he's worked on. We're collaborating. I'm going to be co-directing it with him. I'm in the process of editing. He's coming by this week. But what I'm showing you right now is how do I take all the footage, all the interviews, and what are the actual things that I do in Adobe Premiere to get where it needs to go. So if you want just a couple high-level tips right now, the thing I do is I put all my footage into timelines. I stay away from the bins. I don't like clicking on clips and finding them. I put everything in the timeline so that I can scrub. So I put all my footage in here, and my poor little laptop here is going to be chugging along in this tutorial. You'll have to forgive it because I'm recording the screen as well as playing back 4K footage with like 6 filters on it. But here's all the footage. So those are the tips I'm doing. I put everything into timelines, I use lots of markers, and then I begin cutting down. I begin whittling it down like a funnel so that I don't get overwhelmed with all of it. I just keep doing a next step and a next step to the point I get to the rough cut. And I'm gonna show you what those steps are. So the first thing I do, well actually probably the first thing I do is I create this all footage category right here. So we have all footage, and why it's called 235 is I edit everything, or not everything, in this case I'm editing this project in 235. Let me just zoom in here and get us a clip. This is a 235 format, which is the anamorphic scope, and why I use that format is because my editing monitor out there is 235. It works perfectly, and I like this aspect ratio. But anyways, I just didn't want you to read into why it's called 235. So here's all the footage. I do this at the beginning. This is kind of the reward for me for working hard and getting to this stage in the editing, because I don't love editing. I like when it's working well, but editing is a lot of work. So I like to give myself little rewards. And so I put all my favorite music or the latest music I'm trying to work with, or I put new music that might help me grow as a director, and I put it down here, and I begin to watch back the music. So I can tell that that music's not going to work there. That helps me know right away. Let's see what else we got here. I just begin watching back my project with music here, and I watch all the footage. I spend time watching all the B-roll I shot, and I get to know my footage. If I'm going to be living with this footage for the next, few weeks, and in some cases of a long film, months or years, I want to get to know this stuff. This is going to be my family. I'm going to be living with this footage. So I just begin playing it back, and I begin watching all of it. But then the next thing I do is the most important thing. You just pause it here. That's Julian in laundromat. I just love the 2:3:5 aspect ratio. Look how wide it is here. So the next thing I do is I actually add markers to everything so that I can quickly look at this entire timeline. And how long is this timeline here? Look at this. Are you kidding me? That's 12 hours of footage. That's impressive. I did not realize I shot that much. So there's 12 hours of footage in this project already. And I can zoom out and I can quickly tell what I'm looking at. Because it's so small right now, it's all just clips. This would look like a mess. This would overwhelm you. Like I've always said, you can be stressed, you shouldn't be confused. Right now I'm not confused because I can immediately read my markers here. I have Julian's first interview. I have the skate against hate. I can click in here and see skateboarding footage. It even says it on the timeline. Where are we here? Yeah, here's Kwesi skateboarding. There's a bunch of people. We're downtown. This was like a protest, Black Lives Matter. This is Kwesi skateboarding for that. So I can immediately go into a high-level zoom here and see what I'm having. But how do you add those? Well, let me show you this next. I'm going to go to all interviews. I deleted all my markers here for all interviews so that we could actually do this together. So here we are. Here's Natasha and her daughters. We already have that marker up there. And this is Natasha, one of our characters from our film, and she's chatting with her daughters at the little table here in her kitchen. So now I'm clicking to the next section because, again, this is all my interviews. I've already sunk the audio and I place it all in one timeline, so I have everything in one place. Now I'm going to add a marker here. I'm going to hit M on my keyboard. It might be different for you. I'm going to hit M again, and this pulls it up. So I'm going to call this Natasha Solo Interview. And then I'm going to drag the duration over just so I have a little bit of space to work with. Now I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change it to white just so that it's kind of different colors all the way through so that I can quickly tell what I'm at. Because if you make them all the same color, it's difficult to see the different sections. Just clicking and making it white here. I spelled solo interview wrong, but that's okay because we know what I'm talking about. So now you saw what I just did there. I clicked the side of the marker and it opened up. I'm going to click this other side here and drag that bigger. And I'm just going to look underneath. We're still in the solo interview. Oh, this is still the solo interview, so I'm going to drag it all the way over. Now when I zoom out, I can immediately see, okay, I have Natasha Daughters and Natasha Solo Interview. There you go. You're going to do that for all of your interviews so you can quickly look at them. And what's great too is if you're having a difficult time finding things, you can actually click on this up here and you can open up your markers window, which you just go to Window, click on Markers. And now if I want to find, oh, where was Natasha's solo interview? Let's say I couldn't find it. I could type that in right here. And the same thing goes for quotes. I recommend getting all your interviews transcribed. You can go to a website like rev.com and they allow you to transcribe all your interviews there for really affordable. I'm not sponsored by them, but they're a great website. I recommend it, getting all your interviews transcribed. But let's look at this. Here's the Kwesi interview. So here's all his interviews. We have moments here that I've marked down when I was working with Kwesi in the Edit Suite, because Kwesi is actually the director. He's also in the film. And this is kind of why I'm getting to work with him as a director. It's difficult to direct yourself. It's sometimes nice to have a second person who can have an objective view of what you're saying. So let's look at maybe I'm thinking about, oh, wasn't there a moment he talked about does anyone care? Well, I can see it here in the timeline, but let's say this timeline was really big and I wasn't sure where it was. I can come back here and look at, here's all my markers along the left-hand side here. These are all the quotes I've written down. And I can write down care. And then I'll click on that, and immediately my timeline will show me where I am. So why I do this at the beginning, I spend more time organizing. I spend more time at the beginning organizing my film into these timelines where I have all of the footage, and then I do cut downs for each character. So I have a second timeline with just the little clips that I like, the moments, the good quotes. I get rid of all the moments where my voice is in the interview or where they're thinking about a question. And I only put the good stuff, the reusable moments from their interview in these cut down interviews. So I drag them into a new interview. And what's great, if you have a really big screen, what you can do is you can split your timelines here. So I have two timelines. This is getting pretty crunchy here just because we're on a pretty small computer screen. But here's like, if I were to go to all interviews, you can see here, I already cut up Natasha's interview. But imagine this was a clip we liked. I could go down, I could put her interview down here, and I could just go back to interviews, and I could just begin dragging these down here and adding a quote. And so I don't know what she's actually saying here. We won't get into that, but imagine she was talking about childhood, growing up. I'm just going to drag that over. Now again, a month later, I come back to this edit and I'm watching maybe my rough cut and I go, oh, I need a quote about someone talking about childhood. I just click on this timeline, I come up to my markers here, type in childhood, and there we go. I immediately, when I double click it here, it takes me right to where I need to go. So that's what I do to begin whittling down all of my interviews. And like I said, I do the same for all of my footage. I have Kwesi interview cut down, but then I also have Kwesi B-roll cut down. So I have a timeline here of all the B-roll that I shot with Kwesi. You know, some of it isn't even of him, but it's of his house, it's of the details. It's everything that we shot. There's a picture with him and his wife, and there was him with his kitty. I love cats now that I own one, so I wanted to maybe put that in the film. But here, oh, I love this shot. This shot's really cool. Let's just play this back. This is a shot I envisioned, and it actually worked out really well. It just continually goes. I thought, how do I create a long shot that I could have Kwesi talking about something very deep? There's this shot too. This is neat. Shot this out of the back of a vehicle. Sorry, we're watching my film now. Anyways, what I can do here though is I'm going to show you, I'm going to add some markers again. actually watching this back right now with you guys and remembering these are actually really cool moments, and I want to know where they are in the timeline so I don't have to waste time. So I'm going to hit M. I'm going to write, this is skateboarding. And I know the location personally, so I'm going to say this was at St. Clair. Let's drag the marker over. So now, here we go. Bam. Actually, I have this over top of him with the kitty. We don't want that. I could set another marker, but I'm not going to waste you guys' time. But now I quickly know where skateboarding is. So if I, again, go back to my markers here, and you just you got to do this type of stuff because the time it saves you later on when you're under a deadline or when you're trying to just get that one shot, you can quickly find stuff that works. Just love this shot, sorry. Anyways, let's get back to things. So we've established that we have all our footage in one timeline. Now we've been putting it into smaller timelines. What we have, as I call it, the cut down. So then I begin laying down the interview clips from my interview cut downs, begin laying them down into the rough edit here, and I begin putting B-roll on top of that. Now sometimes I'll create sub clips before I get to the rough cut. I'll just create whole scenes. I'll just name a scene, you know, whatever's happening. So in this case, I could create this as a separate timeline called Julian opener shot. This is the opening of when we first see him as a character. I'm just going to bring the volume down here a bit. And I'm going to mute these tracks because they are not helping us. So this is this is not Kwesi, but this is Julian, one of the other characters from the film, talking about one of his first experiences with the police growing up. And so this is a great way to introduce him. And so I put this into the sequence, and then I have another sequence here that I edited with Kwesi that I had actually put this together in his cut down sequence, and so I just dragged it in. So what I do is I start creating all these mini little scenes, and I just start laying them into the timeline. So for me, the film is essentially just a bunch of small scenes that I eventually weave together into bigger scenes. I kind of try to just take things at bite-size approaches. If I try to create the whole film all at once, it gets a bit overwhelming. That's why, you know, we'll talk about this in another video. When you use the sticky notes, it helps you keep track, because when things start getting overwhelming, you get confused. And again, you can be stressed, you can't be confused. Confusion does not help you create a good film. But here's the sequence with Kwesi. So we've already, what's been so easy with this is I've been able to just come to his cut down interview. I find quotes I want. I'll drag those over. We'll wait for the autosave to be done. We'll drag those over to my interview, to my main edit here, the rough cut. And then I just begin grabbing B-roll and putting it over top. And then that's kind of where I start. But I want to find B-roll that kind of suits what he's talking about. What's great too is when you have your markers on, if I come over here to Kwesi, you begin seeing them at the bottom here. So I know exactly at this frame what we're looking at. You're alone, does anyone care? And so again, really work with markers, they'll really help you. And then from there, you just begin building your film out. And you can see my film is very rough right now. There's huge gaps in it. I'm giving you guys a sneak peek. No one on earth is seeing this timeline except me, Kwesi, and you guys, because we haven't released this film yet. But you can see how kind of chaotic my rough edit is right now. But when I come back to my other sequences, there's a lot more order. I have quotes written out. I have all the perfect clips. I can watch this entire interview I did with Kwesi, which took 2 hours. I have it cut down to 14 minutes. I have the best takes from that. Now, if I want his whole interview, I can go back to all interviews. And there, well, I haven't written it in yet. I would need a marker. But there is his entire interview for the entire length of it. But I've already watched all of that. I've taken out what me and Kwesi think is the best, and we put them into his cut down. Oh, that's Natasha cut down. There's Kwesi cut down. And then I take all of that, and I begin putting it in this rough cut. Now, normally I would love to show you guys a finished film, but we're in the midst of this. But I'm just showing you what it looks like to actually edit a documentary. I'm assuming this doc It's going to be a shorter one. It's probably going to be 10 to 15 minutes long. It might even be longer. Some of the sequences last a really long time. I'm kind of letting this film have a bit more breathing room normally because it's not a commercial film. It's not going to be going to a broadcaster. It's just going to be living on my Vimeo. So this is kind of a film for Kwesi. Him and I are just making this for him. So we get to create it however we want. I love this opening sequence too. Shot this on some vintage lenses. But I hope that helps. Again, put all your footage in timelines, cut it down into cut down timelines, and then from there, start placing that stuff in the rough cut and see if it works. But I wanted to show you guys what an actual project looks like that I'm working on right now.